Good afternoon. My name is Marie McCunningham from the IST-Africa Institute. I'd like to invite you back to Plenary 16 on the 12th of May of IST-Africa 2021. So I'd like to introduce Ntsibane, who's going to present C4IR, South Africa, supporting transformation of manufacturing by leveraging the current wave of technological revolution. In March 2017, the World Economic Forum launched the Centre for the Fourth Industrial Revolution Network with the mission of ensuring that the Fourth Industrial Revolution does not just benefit a select few, but all of society. To date, affiliate centres have been established in the United Arab Emirates, Colombia and Israel in 2019, Brazil, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, South Africa in 2020, and Rwanda in 2021. This presentation will provide an overview of the South African Centre for the Fourth Industrial Revolution that has been established by the South African Department of Science and Innovation in 2020 and is hosted by the CSIR. The Centre is a collaborative platform that harnesses the collective innovation potential of the national system of innovation, the private sector for technology supply and adoption, and public sector partners, along with international partners who've demonstrated leadership in the domain of developing policy implementation protocols and frameworks for transformative technologies and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. This presentation will conclude with a case study of a project to accelerate the adoption of Internet of Things by small and medium-sized enterprises in manufacturing. So it's my pleasure to introduce Ntsibane, who will make his presentation.
I would first thank the IST-Africa organization for inviting us to share our plan for supporting transformation of manufacturing by leveraging the current wave of technological revolution. I will first start by introducing myself. I'm Ntsibane. I have a PhD in computer science. And my career over the years has started with lecturing for about 8 years before I spent the past 14 years at the CSIR as a researcher, then becoming the manager of the research teams within some of the units in the CSIR in the area of telecommunications. I have recently been appointed to lead the new Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution that has been established here. The center is established by the South African government and it's managed and operated by us here at the CSIR. And broadly, the center is established with the objective of ensuring that South Africa has a collaborative platform to effectively take advantage of the Fourth Industrial Revolution in solving its problems. To build a national capability in technology governance. And now in the technology governance, that will include the development of the implementation guidelines, the insights and the policy implementation protocols, as well as the policy frameworks for the effective regulation in this era. It is further established to drive within the national system of innovation, as well as working with the public and private sectors, the development and or adoption of disruptive technology for the benefit of all South Africans. Furthermore, the center is established to showcase the digital transformation, particularly where it involves the small and medium enterprises to make sure that they are part of the digital transformation that we are seeing across all major sectors. In its work, it has now forged a partnership with the World Economic Forum, Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution Network, to share the global best practices and the insights from other areas of the world. The mission of this WEF Centers for the Fourth Industrial Revolution Network is to accelerate the development and implementation of protocols for governance of emerging technologies to foster adoption and best serve citizens. The center is made up of two types of centers, what are called the forum-led centers, that are 4 of them. They are headquarters in San Francisco, and additional 3 centers are in China, Japan, and India. Then we have what are called the partner-led centers, or C4IR affiliates, which have been set up and established in different countries, such as the one that we have here in South Africa. We have others in Rwanda, Norway, Turkey, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and Colombia. Those centers are established and run by those countries themselves. So our center here is established by our government, and it's run by the CSIR here. Now, the priority areas of this center were first established during a consultation process that happened in 2019. But they are also being, fine-tuned to map to the recommendations of the Presidential Commission of the C4IR. We can perhaps maybe take them into 3 broad categories. The first one is the supporting of the modernization of manufacturing, as well as enablement of the smart cities. And this is the area that I'll talk about a little bit more today. That area is linked to one of the recommendations from the PC4IR, that's Presidential Commission on the 4th Industrial Revolution, around the incentivizing future industries, platform and applications, but it also linked to the C4IR network platform on Internet of Things and event transformation. The second area is supporting the ethical adoption of the artificial intelligence, which is linked to one of the recommendations there on the establishment of an AI institute, as well as a C4IR platform on artificial intelligence and machine learning. The final area here among the key priorities is the supporting the development of the digital economy in the country, which is linked to one of the recommendations around securing and availing of data for innovation. And it's also linked to 2 of the network platforms that we have, data policy, as well as blockchain and distributed ledger technology. Within the network, we tend to use a similar type of methodology, and this methodology would be referred to as an Agile Framework. And this Agile Framework comes from the software development industry, where we do have the Agile Frameworks there, but we're applying this into the technology governance as well. The idea here is to look at the way in which we can create impact. We first of all have built all those communities that will then identify key levers for impact and trigger the systemic change. And in every stage of the process, from the opportunity mapping all the way to the scaling side, we go through several iteration processes. So there's the whole process of getting iteration to have a result shown first, then go to the next stage. This is what we go through. But one of the key things is to be able to prototype and test the protocol without having to do a full planning and then only at the implementation realize that it's not implemented. Now, the categories that we look at of the outputs from the projects, as I said, we are dealing with various technology governance protocols. There are 3 categories that we look at. At the earlier end, you have the strategy, or what I call knowledge or insight outputs, which are applied where the technology is evolving fast and the governance parameters are being explored or not clearly defined. At the opposite end is where then the governance gaps for technology are more clearly identified, and clarity on the type of policy output is required, something like a regulation. So you can see that from the left side, you basically have the outputs that are mostly non-binding. On the right-hand side, you have mostly that are binding. Therefore, on the right-hand side, the projects they typically involve the government a lot more than the ones on the left-hand side, where on the left-hand side, you can work a lot more with the academic side, as well as the industry. In the middle, that's where you can call it as a sweet spot. That's where most of the projects are going to be focused on, where there is clarity on the use cases and the application of technology. But you find that the guidance is needed for the wider scale and adoption. And this is where the project that I'm going to talk about a little bit more resides, where the outputs there would come into the incentive structures or best practice standards that one can adopt, as well as the the governance protocols that one could adopt there. So the project that I want to just highlight, having introduced the general methodology here, it's the project on accelerating adoption of IoT in the manufacturing sector. This is part of a global project that we are running within the C4IR network, which it's called the Future of the Connected World Initiative. That we are actually mobilizing all the industry, the public sector to shape the development of the Internet of Things, particularly in the manufacturing sectors. So the key use cases that were considered in the first implementation of the project, which was done in Brazil, were around the asset tracking, machine learning, sensing, image quality control, process scanning, digital twins, as well as the telemetry and power consumption analysis. So those are some of the use cases that they had dealt with. As South Africa, we are now at the beginning of this project, and we are looking at some of those as some of the use cases that will be adopted. We could actually be looking at additional ones within the system, but those are the ones that were looked at from the Brazil side. In terms of where Brazil is, they ran a pilot with 10 companies in 2019, and we went to 130 in 2020. What they are working on now is to scale it to about 2,000 companies across the whole of Brazil. What had happened in the first case was that there were small grants that were provided to the companies. And once they had completed that in 2019, in 2020, they actually self-funded them to be able to get additional use cases developed within their own entity. So it's clear that this can catalyze the work that they are doing. Colombia has 8 projects in pipeline around that area. The other centers like Turkey, they are beginning this project as well as Saudi Arabia. For the South African side, the SME project is meant to have several objectives. The first of them is that we should actually be developing a blueprint for South African adoption of the IoT. Now, this is a similar kind of work that every other center is looking at. The second one is to enhance the SME productivity by supporting the digital transformation in that particular sector. Now, again, this is almost common across all the centers. The one area where we are, in a sense, more on a unique situation where we are driving it as a unique objective is to foster an IoT supplier capability here. So we need to be able to create the demand for these technologies among local businesses. And then once we have done that, we need to identify meaningful policy mechanisms to grow the industry here, even to grow the industry to be able to provide that, provide the IoT services into the sector. Now, if you look at the value chain for the SMMEs, in order to understand that, we will we'll look into enhancing the attractiveness and the willingness of the SMEs to participate into this program. Now, there are 5 areas that we are looking at around the value chain. It's to be able to provide full business diagnosis beyond the scope of the technology. So it's not just the technology, we are looking at the impact that the technology is going to have. We are focusing on enhancing the capabilities through the adoption of the IoTs to be able to pull the IoT expertise that the SMMEs can be able to draw on. So as part of the project, we are looking to bring in the companies that can provide that expertise. Some of the expertise is available in the country, some of them is not. To connect the SMMEs with the IoT vendors and to equip them to better participate in the whole industry chain, in their industry chain, as well as identify additional industry chains that they may be participating in. So as I said, we are at the beginning of the project. So as you can see that the steps that we are going to follow from the inception of the project to the evaluation, we are at the step where we are finalizing the selection of the companies that would be participating. The next step would be to get those companies to come in and conduct an assessment of each of them and conduct the maturity assessment. And once we have compared the maturity assessment of each of the companies, you can then easily map them to the particular use case that they need to start with, and provide assistance for them to go into that site. We then hope that at the end of the project we'll be able to have outlined exactly what are the incentive structures that can be available to enable that the second round could enable more companies to access those incentives that are available for the manufacturing industry in the country. So I'm getting closer to the conclusion. In conclusion, I want to just highlight the partnership that we want to do for the business side. The partnering with the center is through 3 tiers of membership, where the first tier are those that are interested in the governance of the center, and they do make financial contribution to the operation of the center itself. They have a broader interest. Where the tier 2 have interest in particular projects. For instance, if you have a interest in this particular project that I've just talked about, then you get involved in that and you can make a financial contribution or other contribution to the project, but as a partner there. Where tier 3 is where you basically contribute the know-how and become part of the methodology that we live there, but you're not very much interested in the governance of either the project or of the center. You are just interested in contributing your know-how to the process. The second type of partnership that we'll talk about is for the governments. Now, the governments, as I indicated, that some of the outputs here would be more driven by the governments. The governments can actually host their own projects within the center. You don't have to be the Department of Science and Innovation that started the center to be able to host your project there. You can enable the center to do that. As an example here, we are developing a regional smart city community for Africa, which is connected to the G20 Global Smart Cities Alliance, and is anchored here in the C4IR in South Africa. So the cities themselves can become partners, the city governments can become partners in that and adopt the core set of technologies that are being adopted across the whole world to enable the smart cities. So the cities can do that by enabling by appointing the fellows that they put in the center to work on specific policies that are applicable to their cities. And this is just an example of how that can work with the city governments, but with the the other parts of the governments, like in South Africa, where we have three spheres of government. The national government can do that, the provincial government can do that, as well as the municipal government, as I have already indicated in this particular case. So this is the way that we can partner. We are actually open to partnering with with those governments as well as the businesses, both here in South Africa and outside the country. So this is your center, which the Department of Science and Technology, Science and Innovation has just started. We can then make sure that we partner together to deliver the benefits for our continent and for our country specifically. Thank you.
Thanks, Ntsibane. I think it's very exciting that we already have 2 African member states involved in this initiative. So just to start off the discussion, can you talk to us about your perspective in terms of how the knowledge sharing framework is going to support cooperation between affiliate centers? Because I think that's particularly important for developing economies that need to look at generational leapfrogging opportunities.
Yeah, thanks. There's within the network, within the C4IR network, as I indicated, we have a number of affiliates. We typically would come out with, if one of the affiliates has a project and they register it within the system, the other affiliates join the particular project as it is going, so that they can start to understand that work as at the beginning of the project, and they can then get involved into the scaling of the project. So as I indicated in this particular IoT project, it was launched first by the center in Brazil, and we are working with that center, and on a weekly basis, we are working with that center where we are learning a little bit more in terms of how they were able to run that. And then the rest of us are more on the scaling of the models that they've developed. So if you become part of the center team, then you end up having access to those particular protocols that have been developed in one area, and you participate in the communities that then scale it into the next area.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we avoid reinventing the wheel, which happens all too often. So I think that's very important. But in the context of helping other African member states understand what's involved and the contribution of the World Economic Forum to the success of the affiliate centers, can you talk a little about what enabling tools or frameworks or other support can be leveraged by the affiliate centers as part of the contribution of the World Economic Forum?
Yeah, so obviously, we've talked about the networks that can be leveraged. There are a number of tools that the World Economic Forum makes available to the affiliate centers. And some of those tools would be the intelligence maps, where if the affiliate center wants to go into a particular area, they can then use those intelligence map to map different topics of interest to them, to quickly get access to that particular knowledge there. The other method is what I alluded to around the fellow system. So within there, if one of the affiliate centers want to accelerate its knowledge of how to apply the Agile Framework, they can then send their affiliate center, their fellow, to the San Francisco center, where they can then work faster with the people that are working there. Now, and as an example, I want to just highlight the fellow model with an example of how Rwanda used that to accelerate the adoption of the drones in the health services. So Rwanda then appointed a fellow who then was based in the center in San Francisco and was working full-time on the project linking the team in Rwanda together with the team at the World Economic Forum. Within there, they were able to bring together the civil aviation authorities in Rwanda and the health authorities, as well as the ICT side, for all of them to work together for that governance model that could be used in that, and then piloted the governance model. And within 18 months, there was a pilot of that model that was already running. And it became so successful that at the end of that, when Rwanda adopted those new regulations, a number of countries across the world, including the US, started to look at that and modified their own regulations to adopt that particular site. So this fellow model, demonstrated that you can actually quickly get the country on board. So this is one of the models that I'm seeing as the number of governments that are existing on the continent. You don't have to have your own center. You can actually work through the two centers that we have currently on the continent and be able to send to your fellow that we can then, capacitate to be able to run such projects in your own country.
And then typically, do individual governments have to pay for that fellow, or how are the fellows traditionally funded, if you can call it traditionally, since this is so new?
Yeah, so the countries do pay for the fellow to be in there. So the model that most countries used was to use their their embassies in those different countries. And a number of countries do that. In South Africa here, we do that when we want to embed a particular individual to another entity. We use the missions. You embed the person in a mission, but they work full-time within from that mission within the C4IR system. So they do have to pay.
Yeah, I think that makes enormous sense, because that makes it so much easier with visas and clearances and things like that, particularly from poorer countries. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And then what are some of the South African government's objectives in relation to exploring cross-border cooperation? I think it's more or less implicit in what you've already said, but just specifically, since DSI has a strong long-term, or South Africa has a long-term reputation in terms of collaboration on research, for example, with other African member states, are you looking at leveraging those networks, or how are you looking at prioritizing that kind of cross-border cooperation?
Yes, I think we are working very closely with the Department of Science Innovation, and I think maybe the next step would be to link up with the networks that they have. So what we started was an engagement with SADC, particularly around the issue of the smart cities within the region. So SADC is one of the areas that we will be looking to use that. And we are exploring how we can link the work that is coming in, that is supported by the center, with the work of the African Union, particularly under the Continental Free Trade area specifically. So you can understand that if you're going then have a trading across many different countries, you can actually adopt this particular type of technologies to enable the common standards across different areas. You do the condition monitoring there, but for doing that condition monitoring, you may need a coordination in terms of which spectrum is allocated for use by the IoT systems that will be deployed across a number of countries and so on.
Yeah, but I think in terms of having systemic impact, coordinating through the African Union and explicitly driving this through the wonderful opportunity that the Continental Free Trade Agreement provides us with, I think is a strategically important way for everyone to understand this is not just to South Africa's benefit, this benefits everyone. And so can I offer the floor to anybody else who's any questions or comments on this presentation? And then I have one final question I'd ask you before we close. Okay, so I don't see any hands up and I don't see any questions in chat. So just the final question, Ntsibane, before I thank you for your contribution, is to ask you, what is the progress to date, or what's the status in terms of identifying or confirming either tier 1 or tier 2 partners, and what approach are you taking to that task, which I suppose is one of your core personal responsibilities?
Yes, no, thanks for highlighting that. What we are currently finalizing at this stage is to have an interim advisory board, which will then be a key, governance tool that we will be using to engage with the industry. Now, you'd understand that we said the organization, the center should be, multi-stakeholder center. So the tier 1 partners would be part of the governance. But what we need to do is that advisory team needs to now get assist with the model of the PPP organization that we need to have. How it links with the CSIR, it links with the national government, as well as the members that will be coming in as supporting members. So that's the first part. The second part that we are planning is that from next month, we will start to have the business roundtables. The business roundtables will be 2 types, and some of them would be more generally about the center objectives. And this will be driven by this advisory board that we are having. And some of them will be focused on specific applications. So if we can have, for instance, bringing together the expertise on the adoption of IoT in different sectors. And then we'll have, through those engagement with the businesses, we will then be bringing them on board to go a little bit more in details of the benefits that they will be getting by signing up with us. So in that model, we are supported very strongly by the World Economic Forum. So we are hoping to start signing up the tier 1 members from the next quarter, with the view that in the latter part of the year, then we can be able to launch the center officially with tier 1 partners already on board, with now the governance board that will now be including those tier 1 members.
Ntsibane, that all sounds very promising, and I wish you and your colleagues every success. So I just hand over to Miriam now as we just summarize what will happen this afternoon.
Thank you very much. So we'd like to thank Ntsibane for taking the time to prepare this presentation and for joining us today and sharing the interesting developments on this centre, and we look forward to more information next year. So now we're going to move in the afternoon to the next phase of next generation computing, and this will look at AI, languages in the context of social robots, UAVs, and the impact of big data and decision making on IoT. and then followed by e-infrastructures, which will look at Africa Connect, TV white spaces, 5G, and IPv6. And then we have a session on power, ICT supporting power delivery. So now you have a short break, and then we'll start again with the next session at 13:40 South African time. Thank you very much.